And we're live.
Good evening. It's June 24th, 2024, and I'm going to call our regular council meeting to order at 6:31. We'd like to begin by this playing of our Canadian national anthem. So if you may, please rise. We'd like to begin this meeting by doing our land acknowledgement. So we would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Shelburne resides within the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. These traditional territories upon which we live, work, play, and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions. And it is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources. Again, if any member of council is required to declare a pecuniary interest, please do so now or at the point that we come to. And again, that also is required to be in writing to the clerk. That takes us on to adoption of the minutes. Does anybody have any comments with regards to the minutes from the June 3rd meeting? Seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. All in favor? That carries. Next up, we do have the agenda. Oh, sorry. First off, it's public question period. Is there any public questions?
No questions were received.
Thank you. So as far as presentations tonight, we do have a proclamation, and this is for the Canadian Multiculturalism Day. And whereas June 27th is Canadian Multiculturalism Day, a day to celebrate the culture, diversity of Canadians, and the history that brought us to this day. It was on October 8th, 1971, in a statement to the House of Commons that Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau announced multiculturalism as an official government policy. The intent was not only to preserve the cultural freedom of the individuals, but also to recognize the cultural contributions of diverse ethnic groups to Canadian society. And whereas Canadians celebrate Canadian Multiculturalism Day on June 27th, a day to discover and appreciate the wealth and diversity of Canadian society, show their love of Canada and pride in being Canadian. And whereas the town of Shelburne is committed to advancing a culture of cooperation, equity, and respect, with appreciation for the contributions of the various multicultural groups and communities. Now, therefore, I, Deputy Mayor Shane Hall, on behalf of Council, do hereby proclaim June 27th, 2024, as Canadian Multiculturalism Day in the town of Shelburne, and urge all residents to take notice of the importance of the diversity that makes up our lives and our community. Next is council inquiries. Do we have any inquiries? Councillor Bernardo?
Yes, I do. We have one of the top student athletes in Dufferin County, Callista Daly. She brought home a medal, and she has been recognized at, let me try to get it here, at a meet that was held at Western University from June the 8th, and was featured as the best school athlete from across the province. And I think that the town should recognize her as well for her achievements. And I'm wondering if we can set up a date to be able to bring her in and award her a medal and a certificate.
So I really think that that's important. It's certainly something that we can ask staff to do and put on a future agenda. Denise, anything to add?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor Hall, yes, we certainly will just need some more details, and similar to other recognitions that can be coordinated with the individual for inclusion in a future agenda or recognition similar to what is happening at the next meeting for the team that was successful at OFSA.
The article was in the Shelburne Free Press on page 8 of last week's Free Press. It was quite an article on her. I can bring in the part that I cut out, or if you have a copy in Town Hall, you will find it there. And it's got all the information on her.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bernardo. We'll look at that article. We'll just make sure we just have to find her personal contact information in order to follow up with her. Thanks.
Okay, I'm wondering if Councillor Bouchardy may be able to help you out with that as well, as he seems to have some connections still with the high school.
Certainly, we'll follow up with that if we need to.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it for my inquiries.
Did I see your hand up, Councillor Wagner?
Yes, thanks so much. I guess my inquiry is just a very quick one. Just wondering, maybe, I don't know if Jim's online. Yeah. The status of the Walters Creek Park. I've had a couple of community members reach out to me and just wanting to know when that will be completed. I think the sign says something about June, but we've had a significant amount of rain, so I'm assuming that might be part of the reason why it's delayed. But just wondering if we could get a brief sort of update on when Walters Creek will be completed.
Yes, through the deputy mayor. We did run into issues with wet conditions over there, as well as quite a bit more topsoil covering the area that we had to get removed from the site. The water was the big issue. They finally got it down to areas where they could work, and they were planning to be back today to continue away on that. So as soon as they can get back here, that work will be completed and we'll have that finished off. So it should be within the next couple of weeks.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Did I also see your hand, Councillor Sample?
Yeah, not so much an inquiry, just a thank you put out to everybody that worked on the gate entrance at Highland Park to enter the rail bed from the school. So I was contacted by a few of the teachers, and they want to thank us for opening that up again so we can get the kids out on the trail. So big thank you.
Okay, no other inquiries. That takes us on to section 6 for motions and bylaws. First, we have a report, DO 2024-05 from the Director of Development and Operations regarding the Connecting Link contract award.
And good evening, Council, through the Deputy Mayor. With the town of Shelburne, we do have 3 sections technically to our Connecting Link through town. Main Street East, Main Street West, and the Owen Sound section. And we were lucky enough a few years ago through rigorous applications for resurfacing funding to get Main Street East included in funding. We did apply, the town did apply for the 2023-24 grant for resurfacing for the Owen Sound section. And we were successful with that. We were notified by the ministry April 3rd, 2023. Requests for proposals were produced for that section of road and advertised, circulated to contractors in the area. We did have 4 submissions that finally came back to us for this project. This would cover resurfacing as well as the interlocking stone downtown on the Owen Sound section, not Main Street West, which I'll get back to a little later. We did apply for that, and that one was disallowed, so it is included in the pricing from the contractor that had to be pulled back. As well as new crossing at 4th Avenue, Owen Sound for pedestrians there and students. Curb work, catch basins, that sort of thing. The inclusive price that came back for our contract there did come from Forest Contracting Limited for $794,354.65 HST inclusive. When we look at that, that is considerably lower than what the estimate was for the project and what we ultimately did get funding through the Ministry of Transportation with. So staff and our engineers, Burnett Associates, have been in contact with MTO about expanding the project possibly to use those additional funds. And that has been well received by MTO if we want to continue and widen out some sections of sidewalk that don't meet our design standard as it is now. Possible guardrail replacing north of Fiddle Park Lane and additional curbing works that can be undertaken there. So that does look good that we'd be able to not lose out on that project, that additional funding. The project was funded for just over $1.3 million, inclusive of HST. The town's portion of that is 10%, which is just over $130,000, which is funded from our road construction capital reserves. Forest Contractors did put in this lowest bid. They have done work for us before that's been held up very well. So we would suggest that we recommend giving the contract to Forest Contracting. This is over staff's limit for with our purchasing policy for allowing that to go ahead. And as part of the funding, we do need a resolution from council as well. Consultations were with the Ministry of Transportation, Isaac Ferreira, Burnett Associates, Lisa Johnson, Dave Dagenet, and Blake Aram, as well as Carrie, our financial services and treasurer, Carrie Holmes. This does align with council's strategic priorities as SP number 2, invest in critical infrastructure and services for the future. And the recommendation letter from our engineers is contained in Appendix 1.
Thank you. Is there any questions from members of council? Councilor Bernardo?
Sorry, I wasn't going to ask questions, but I will ask this one. When you say widening of certain sidewalks, where are you thinking, Jim?
What we were thinking is First and Second Avenue in that area north. There is some in there that we that can be included in this. So that's the section we're looking at. Stuff that don't meet our design criteria now, because we do have a wider design criteria right now. Some of those areas are pretty tight, and when our track list does go through there, you can't help but tear up some of the grass. So this will help give us that extra width there and keep us on the concrete portion.
Thank you.
Councilor Wagner?
Yeah, thank you so much. Just really quick. It says down here that the bid includes ineligible costs, which would be the Main Street West paving stone replacement. So I just wanted to make sure, so that's getting done then.
Through the deputy mayor, no, that would have to be removed from that portion of it.
Okay.
We didn't apply for the west portion of the connecting link as we had the opportunity with Highland Village through Tribute developments there a few years ago. They had to do a portion of the west side of Main Street there for the forest main for sewage to come down to Adeline. And we did kick in an additional amount there for that section of road at that time. But the paving stones weren't done at that point. When we did do the east section of Main Street, once we pulled up those stones and did look at them, the salt and such has taken its toll on the unilock itself on the bottom side. So up to 70% of it was eroded away, sort of thing. It was just a matter of time before they were all over the place for anybody walking on it. So that portion is not included. That is something we have to look at in the future if we pull those unilock pieces up over there and find that they are just as deteriorated. But the north section of the connecting link, or Main Street east and then north, does take 2/3 of our traffic volumes, and it's about 1/3 that continues on through town to the west. So there is less traffic over there, less chance of the spray of salt water coming off the roads in the winter, that sort of thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We have any other questions? Councillor Sample?
Just a quick question. Maybe I missed it. When would the work commence?
Through the deputy mayor, as soon as possible. We weren't able to give the go-ahead to the contractor just because we do need the council resolution, but we did let them know that all the contractors have been phoning in to see how the RFP went. So they are aware that they're the low bidder. As soon as we give them the go-ahead, they can start to mobilize, and we hope to have them in the next month or so.
Okay.
The schedule, yeah.
Okay. And then are we, obviously, I'm thinking we have to detour some traffic, don't we? For this?
They are planning on having one lane of traffic open continuously. That is going to be a little difficult right downtown, right at our intersection at Main Street going sound. That did take a couple of days last time just to do the eastbound section there when we did that a few years ago. But the contractor themselves are going to be responsible for traffic control, or if needed, police presence there as well. So
Yeah, so I'm just worried about our offshoots. We got William and we got Greenwood streets and all those other streets, Robert, all in amongst that area, Fiddle Park. They're going to get hit with some high traffic because the delays are going to just reroute people. So I want to make sure everybody's understanding that, especially with work commencing, and school should be over by then, but still maybe not totally, but we got to watch it.
Through the deputy mayor, we will make sure that's posted on our website as well, because as you mentioned, people that are familiar with town, they know the ways around that section.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. So a high police presence would be good on off-standing shoots, not necessarily just where they're working, but necessarily our offshoots too, because it's gonna get bad. Okay, thank you.
So seeing no other questions, I'll read the recommendation, then look for a mover and seconder. So the recommendation is, be it resolved that council receives staff report DO 2024-05 with respect to the connecting link contract award, Owen Sound street resurfacing, and that council awards contract M22028 to Forest Contractors Limited, being the lowest qualified submission and inclusive of provisional items in the amount of $780,615.81 plus HST, and that council directs staff to include scope enhancements that remain within the eligible funding limit, which is an additional $264,547.70, as previously approved by council, and authorizes the CAO to approve the costs for the enhancements remaining with the approved budget and funding limit. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Sample. All in favor? That carries. That takes us up to item number 2, which is a report FS 2024-05 from the Director of Financial Services Treasurer regarding the 2024 Asset Management Plan.
Thank you, Council, and through the Deputy Mayor. I just have a little quick update for everybody before I pass it over to Chad for his presentation. I just wanted to let, especially for some of the newer councillors, how we got to where we are today. So the town's original asset management plan was adopted in 2016. And in 2017, the province passed Ontario Regulation 58817, which required that we adopt a strategic asset management policy. So that was adopted in 2019. And it was to establish an approach that we would take with our asset management journey and set basic requirements and objectives for us to follow. Following that, we ran into COVID. So of course, the timeline that the regulations set out was all pushed back by a year. So the asset management plan that was adopted last year, in 2022, was actually something that should have been adopted in 2021 and so on. So here we are today in 2024, adopting a plan that was originally slated for 2023. So similar to the last update, staff again led this project instead of consulting it out to an independent consultant team. And preparation for this plan basically began as soon as we adopted the 2022 plan. So we've been working on it for quite some time. And that is mostly Chad in the background. The project team did involve several town staff and a significant time commitment from our asset management working group, which consisted of Jim, our Director of Development and Operations, Chad, myself, and our Deputy Treasurer, Marion. So we would meet in the background and then pull in all the different departments as needed. And a total of approximately 650 hours was spent working on this plan just in this calendar year alone. That does not include the time that Chad has spent over the last 2 years cleaning up our inventory. So once the draft was prepared, then we met with senior staff, and overall the project encompassed approximately 10 of our Town of Shelburne staff. One thing that is important to note is that this asset management plan does not include the buildings of the CDRC, the fire department, the library, or the curling club. Those facilities all operate with their own separate financials and their own separate policies and plans, so they are not included in this one at this point. One thing that you will probably notice, and it's identified in Chad's presentation as well, is the funding gap, which is the consolidated portion of the total plan. And that gap is approximately $94.3 million, which we didn't want you to be alarmed by that number. That is perfectly normal. It may seem significant, but it's not uncommon for that number to be that high. And this is why the province has asked municipalities to work through these asset management plans so that a number like that can be identified, and that will help us with future planning, future budgets, and identifying long-term capital needs. So, while those shortfalls do exist, something else to remember is that is over a 10-year period. So in that 10-year period, there will be funding opportunities for us to apply for grants. There will be donated assets from subdivisions that we can't think of the word, when we assume the subdivisions. And things like grants and that do come, that if we are favorable and successful in achieving them, they will lower that funding gap. And an example of that is the grant that we have just applied for with the water enabling housing system. And if we were to be successful in getting that grant, there's $35+ million already off of that 94 million gap. In our 2023 budget framework for the, our 2024 budget framework that we presented to council prior to the 24 adoption of the budget, staff did start recommending that some of the transfers to reserves that we had been making were not significant enough and needed to be increased. And we did do that within the 2024 budget as much as we could with having the levy increase that we did. But something that working through this asset management plan has identified is that those increases to the reserves are not enough. We need to, not only do they need to increase or continue, but they also need to increase. And that will be brought forward when we start working on our long-term capital plan, which is something that this asset management plan will assist and align with better, and will replace our 2022 to 2026 long-term capital plan that we currently have. So there's no direct financial implications to adopting this plan tonight, and it is a requirement of the legislation, but there certainly are some benefits to approving it, and those benefits will be seen in the coming months when we present our future budgets to you. So Chad has prepared the asset management document, which I don't know if you've all read it, 280 some pages, but he does have a presentation for you tonight to just capture some of the highlights of the plan. And I just have to put a plug out for Chad, because without his assistance in this project, it would not be where it is today. He kept all of the staff on track, called all the meetings, made us sit down and get it right into the weeds with where our assets were. And we did play a little bit of hide and seek with finding which assets were where and marking them and identifying where they're stored. And it really was a fantastic exercise, really, for everybody involved. He's done a tremendous job cleaning up the inventory, which predated all of us. It was an inventory package that we all inherited. And the working documents and charts and spreadsheets that we have, and photos that are behind the scenes that you don't see, that are required to make up the document that is in the agenda package, is nothing short of impressive. Having said all that, we still do have a lot more work to do. There is a lot of underground infrastructure that we still need to map and find and make sure that we've got all the little bits and pieces mapped on the GIS, and we know that part of it isn't perfect yet. But any new data that is entered into the citywide software is of much greater detail and clarity than in the past. So we are confident that what we are leaving as we work our way through this process, what we are leaving for future staff, is in far more better shape than what we had to work with, and all the missing information in that. So I'm very proud of what the team has done, and 2 years was a long time to get this far, but we're very happy to be presenting this tonight. So I will turn it over to Chad.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good evening, council. As Gary mentioned, my name is Chad. I am the GIS coordinator, and I will be reviewing the 2024 asset management plan with you tonight. So I'll begin by sharing my screen. Okay. So this is the outline for the presentation. We'll begin with an introduction, and we'll discuss what asset management is, what an asset management plan is. We'll look at some applicable legislation, and then we'll go over the contents of the asset management plan. After that, we'll move into some concepts, which will be key to understanding different portions of the presentation and also help with understanding the asset management plan itself. After that, we'll look at some key statistics. We'll then move into some limitations of the asset management plan and the data that was used to form it. And then we'll have a look at some next steps for Shelburne's asset management program. And after that, we will have a question period. And with that, I please ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation. Okay, so to get started with our introduction, we have a video to show tonight from the Municipal Finance Officers Association of Ontario, and it is on asset management planning. It provides a great general introduction to what asset management is. So I will start the video now.
Municipalities take pride in providing and maintaining the many services citizens depend on every day, like transportation, clean drinking water, recreation, garbage collection, and recycling. For instance, the municipality of MFOA has approximately $20 billion in municipal infrastructure assets that are critical to delivering these services. These include roads, bridges, sewer and water systems, recreation facilities, and parks. The municipality of MFOA is similar to many municipalities. They're facing challenges because of aging infrastructure. Many of their assets are reaching the end of their life cycle, and there's a need for new infrastructure to service growth. This is where asset management planning comes in. Asset management planning is the process used to help make the best possible decisions regarding the building, operating, maintaining, renewing, replacing, and disposing of infrastructure assets. Simply
Sorry, I think we may be having an issue having the video show.
put,
I will
it's all about making the right
restart the presentation. Okay, let's give this another try.
Municipalities take pride in providing and maintaining the many services citizens depend on every day, like transportation, clean drinking water, recreation, garbage collection, and recycling. For instance, the municipality of MFOA has approximately $20 billion in municipal infrastructure assets that are critical to delivering these services. These include roads, bridges, sewer and water systems, recreation facilities, and parks. The municipality of MFOA is similar to many municipalities. They're facing challenges because of aging infrastructure. Many of their assets are reaching the end of their life cycle, and there's a need for new infrastructure to service growth. This is where asset management planning comes in. Asset management planning is the process used to help make the best possible decisions regarding the building, operating, maintaining, renewing, replacing, and disposing of infrastructure assets. Simply put, it's all about making the right decision at the right time for the right amount. Municipalities focus on three fundamental goals: providing sustainable services to residents, optimizing municipal infrastructure asset value while minimizing lifecycle costs, and managing risks to service delivery. For example, the municipality of MFOA takes a proactive approach and initially developed a corporate asset management plan in 2014. In 2019, the municipality developed a new policy and updated its plan to meet the new provincial regulation requirements and improve management of all assets. The planning and policy development process provides a clear, detailed picture of our assets, needs, and priorities, which plays an important role in the development of the municipality's multi-year budget. An optimal amount of funding is required to manage current and future asset risks. The difference between the optimal amount and available budget is what we call the infrastructure gap. If the infrastructure gap increases, it will result in inaccessible assets or assets that are not in optimal use. So, we need to balance growth, catch up on overdue maintenance of existing assets, finance the replacement of old assets, and modernize our infrastructure to be better prepared for tomorrow's challenges, while striving to keep property taxes, water, and wastewater rates reasonable for residents. The municipality of MFOA's corporate-wide asset management plan is how they prioritize infrastructure needs to achieve the greatest benefit to the community and to ensure the municipality is a great place to live now and well into the future. For more information on asset management planning, visit MFOA's website.
Okay. Again, my apologies for the hiccup with the video, but it looks like we're all set to go now. We'll move on with the presentation. So having a look at some of those concepts that were covered in the video, what is asset management? It is a business approach to the administration of capital assets. The primary goal is to minimize the cost to maintain assets while maximizing the value that they provide. Outlining the level of service to meet the expectations of the community is another aspect of asset management, as well as structuring a life cycle strategy for assets, which covers everything from acquisition to replacement. And finally, risk management is understanding the risks associated with decisions relating to the life cycle strategy for assets. And now looking at what an asset management plan is. It covers a number of those same concepts. It's a tool for long-term planning for council staff and the public. It provides a detailed overview of the asset portfolio. It looks at the level of service, sets level of service objectives, and outlines related performance measures. It outlines the life cycle strategy for each asset category, detailing the costs associated with each step. It considers assets that are high risk and the impact in the event of failure. And it reviews future demands, which include forecasted changes in demand or growth, and what impacts those have on the asset management strategy. And how the asset management plan is used, it supports decision-making and planning for long-term capital needs. It also supports grant applications. And it's best used alongside related documents such as the annual budget and the long-term capital plan. Now we'll have a look at the applicable legislation. Ontario 588/17 Asset Management Planning for Municipal Infrastructure outlines the requirements for municipalities to report on their asset management strategies. It includes timelines for specific reporting documents to be completed, as well as the content to be discussed in each. The first document required is a strategic asset management policy with a completion deadline of July 1st, 2019. The next 3 steps consist of updates to the town's asset management plan with an increased level of detail required at each step. In 2022, the update must be inclusive of core municipal infrastructure assets only. As of 2024, all other municipal infrastructure assets must be incorporated into the plan. And by July 1st, 2025, municipalities must propose a level of service that is to be provided over the 10-year period, including a detailed analysis of each different level of service option. And so having a look at our progress so far, we passed our asset management policy on May 27, 2019. In 2022, we passed our asset management plan phase 1. And today we are looking at phase 2 of the asset management plan with a due date of July 1st, 2024. Each asset management plan must be endorsed by the executive lead of the municipality and adopted by a resolution passed by the municipal council. And these are outlined in the legislation. So we'll have a look at the scope of the 2024 asset management plan, which is phase 2 in the legislation. It includes all municipal infrastructure assets. For those assets, we must discuss the quantity and their replacement cost, their age, and an estimate of their condition. We also must discuss the level of service and the performance measures used to support the level of service. We also look at the life cycle strategy for those assets, discuss risk, and finally, future demand. And this is all over a 10-year planning period. So having a look at the different asset categories that are in the document this year, there are 14 in total. Some of these are grouped in the asset management plan, which I will discuss on the next slide. So this includes our bridges, culverts, facilities, fleet, land improvements, machinery and equipment, roads, sidewalks, signs, stormwater, streetlights, traffic lights, wastewater, and water. So looking at the structure of the 2024 asset management plan, it begins with an executive summary, an introduction, which are then followed by definitions and methodology. Following this are the asset categories, which are grouped into individual sections. And within each section, you will find the quantity and replacement cost, aging condition, level of service, life cycle strategy, risk management, and recommendations. The exception to the organization of asset categories by section are bridges and culverts, and another section called transportation. And the reason that some assets are grouped as a section is due to how closely related they are. And finally, section 14 closes the document by discussing future demand, looking at projected changes in demand and growth. So we'll switch over to concepts. We'll have a look at some key terminology that will help to understand the presentation, and also that can be applied when reviewing the asset management plan. So first, the asset inventory is a collection of structured asset data. This is where each asset is recorded individually along with its in-service date, financial and operational history. Other information such as the material or dimension of an infrastructure asset, as it might be applicable, is stored here as well. The next, a category. It refers to a group of related assets. An example could be the water category, which encompasses distribution mains, fire hydrants, valves, and so on, as they all provide a similar service. Next is segment, which is a subcategory of assets within a category. So going back to that example of water being the category, the items in water, distribution mains, fire hydrants, and valves, they would all be segments. Next, quantity simply refers to the number of assets, and it's discussed in the asset management plan that this may differ for each category. An example is looking at linear assets like some water and wastewater segments. These are represented in the asset management plan as quantity, which refers to the number of records in the inventory, as well as length. Next is replacement cost. So there's two methods used in the asset management plan for replacement cost. These are cost per unit and an inflated historical cost. Cost per unit stems from data provided by the town's contract engineering firm, recent quotes, invoices, or estimates from other studies. When data is not available or it is not reasonable to perform a cost per unit, that's when the historical cost is inflated as an alternative. Next is useful life. This is determined through recommendations from manufacturers, engineering staff, and experience with similar infrastructure. It's an estimate of how long the asset can be predicted to remain in service, and it's typically standardized by segment. And so what I mean by that is that if we look at a roads category, and within the roads category, we have two segments, surface and base. All surface assets, unless they are structurally different, should have the same useful life. And the same would apply to base. Next, looking at age, this is simply the number of years an asset has been in service compared to a certain year. And in the case of the 2024 asset management plan, we're looking at 2024. Next is condition. This is an overall condition of an asset or segment as they're organized in the asset management plan. And there are two methods for determining condition. The first and preferred method is field inspections. So these are estimated by members of town staff or the town's contract engineering firm, and they are based on visual inspections of the infrastructure or the asset. And when those are not available, age-based assumptions of condition are used. And when we're looking at condition ratings, the town follows a 0 to 100 rating, with 100 being best and 1 being lowest. Looking at level of service. So these are used to establish clear performance targets for assets and the service it provides. So there are level of service objectives, and to support them, performance measures are used. We'll have a deeper look at level of service later in the presentation. Next is the life cycle strategy. This is a schedule of activities for an asset from the time it is purchased to when it needs to be replaced or disposed. It includes an estimate of the cost of what each activity throughout the asset's life cycle will cost, and it looks at the funding that is available to support that. And we'll also have a deeper look at this one later in the presentation. And last is risk. Risk in the context of the 2024 asset management plan. It looks at critical assets and the service impact or consequences in the event that that asset were to fail. Also explored in risk are potential risks that are associated with factors of climate change. So we'll have a look at level of service. So level of service begins by outlining customer value. So what elements of the service are most important to residents? And so these are qualitative statements that reflect the elements of the service that are most important. They're written to be relevant from a customer's point of view. An example could be something simply as the road should have a comfortable ride. These are then linked to service parameters, and these are aspects of a service. So these could be things like quality, accessibility, reliability. And these then form what are known as level of service objectives. Level of service objectives outline what the organization will achieve for each service parameter. So an example could be that assets are designed to be accessible for all users. And these are then connected to performance measures. And so these, the connection or linkage is so that those qualitative statements that stem from the customer values and form the level of service objectives can be turned into quantifiable data and indicators of performance. And they're used to measure that we're meeting the level of service objectives that we set up for ourselves. And the final step of level of service is ongoing monitoring and review. So, those performance measures are looked at annually. They're looked at in each iteration of an asset management plan, and they should be reviewed for suitability. And if the objective needs to be changed or performance target needs to be changed, that's an important step of level of service. Next is life cycle strategy. So this outlines a structure for each phase of an asset's service life, from acquisition to replacement. It outlines the forecasted cost for each activity and the projected level of funding that's available. So this is clearly a critical component to the decision-making tools provided in the asset management plan. The 2024 asset management plan organizes life cycle activities into 4 steps. First is acquisition. So these are new assets that are purchased in response to an increase in demand or to accommodate growth. Second is operation. Operation activities refer to those that do not physically change the asset, but are necessary for it to function. So an example could be the cost of a study, inspection fees, or the cost of utilities to operate assets. Next is maintenance. These refer to activities that do physically change the asset to retain its performance. An example of this could be pothole repairs or flushing of wastewater mains. And lastly is replacement. And this is the replacement of an existing asset at the end of its service life. And this is to renew the performance of that asset. Next is risk management. So in the 2024 asset management plan, risk is considered for critical assets. And these are assets which carry the highest impact to service and the most severe consequences in the event of failure. And so step 1 in the risk management section in the asset management plan is to highlight those critical assets. Next is to assess what the potential risks are in the event that a life cycle activity for that asset was underfunded or deferred if funding was not available. So this is the what can happen. Next is to outline the potential service impact, the consequences for the organization, and then finally, risks associated with climate change. And so these are explored against factors such as the frequency of severe weather and higher average temperatures are a couple common examples. So the key message in the asset management plan, alongside the financial and operational data, is to communicate how these concepts are connected. So the level of service is understanding what's expected from customers. We then have our life cycle strategy, which tells us what needs to happen to meet that level of service, what the costs are, where the funding shortfalls are. We then balance that against the risks associated with that management strategy. What can happen if we don't do something or change the way we're going to fund something. And this, in the end, provides informed and data-driven decision-making tools in the asset management plan. So next we'll look at some key statistics. So here is the replacement cost as of 2024, using a mixture of cost per unit or inflated historical cost as was permitted by the data. And then the third column shows the percent of the total replacement cost for each asset category. And so for the 2024 asset management plan, this was presented as 163,030,646. Next, we will look at the age-based condition of the portfolio with the replacement cost of assets in each condition rating. So we look at good down to, or sorry, very good down to very poor, and the percent of the portfolio that is in that condition rating. So using good as an example, we can see it is just over 30%, and assets that are rated good based on their age account for 33,384,169 to replace in 2024. And next, we'll have a look at portfolio average age. This, along with the other two visualizations, as well as the next one, does appear in the executive summary. So this looks at each asset category and the average age. And there are factors to consider when you're looking at figures like this. An example is new subdivisions, which are assumed by the town, and that results in a large quantity of infrastructure, the same infrastructure, being assumed at once. So that can explain, some assets being having very early in service dates, but still showing a middle average age of not being too old, because there are enough newer assets to dilute the group. And finally, this is the figure that was mentioned in the treasurer's report. This is the projected life cycle expenditures for the portfolio. And again, these are those 4 life cycle activities: acquisition, operation, maintenance, and replacement. And the total projected expenditures are those 4 columns added together. And so that totals 207,635,572, and put against the total available funding that was estimated at the time of writing the asset management plan. The funding gap, as was outlined, shows as 94 million, just under 300,000. And the next visual just shows this as a chart. And you'll notice those same colors that we looked at when we were discussing the concept of life cycle activities are used, and these are used throughout the asset management plan to assist with recognizing the different life cycle costs. And the black line represents the funding that is predicted for that, that is estimated for that year. So having a look at some limitations of the asset management plan. So the first and foremost is data availability. As the treasurer mentioned, we are still working on adding in some asset categories and building them up to 100% completion, particularly with underground infrastructure. So in the case of, I'll use stormwater as an example, if we're missing a certain portion of town, then that is lost in terms of the replacement value that's reflected in the asset management plan. And second to that is data integrity. We have a large portion of data that does predate the town's current approach to asset management, and it doesn't follow, as a result, the outline from the strategic asset management policy. And so what this does is it results in some methods to calculate things like replacement costs or an estimate of the construction date or the historical costs that do not align with the current strategy. And these are updated as they are found using the same data, but just calculated in a way that matches our current strategy. Another limitation is that 10-year forecast period. It's best looked at in terms of the 3 different blocks. Years 1 to 3 could be thought of as having a higher accuracy than years 3 to 5, and then 5 to 10 would have a lower accuracy than the earlier years. And that's simply because of the time period. When we look at the last 4 years and how drastically construction costs have changed. And so how do we address these limitations? Well, first we have to look at where are those shortfalls and see what's an applicable method to improve the data that we have. And second, as was mentioned in the treasurer's report, we continuously undertake a controlled and phased improvement to make our data better. And that can clearly be seen from the 2022 to the 2024 asset management plan. We have much more instances of cost per unit. We have a better estimate of quantities, and that makes for a better asset management plan. And last, it's addressed by having a continuous review. We look at the data that's presented in the asset management plan and the data that's in the inventory, and we figure out, how can we make this better? Where are the shortfalls, as I mentioned, and just keep looking to see how it can be improved. So now we'll look at the next steps. So the next step will be in 2025. This time next year, we'll look at the asset management plan phase 3. So again, we're going to look at all municipal infrastructure assets, largely the same requirements, except we're going to be looking at the level of service options. And what this means is that we will be determining of our level of service. We have a cost-effective method, a recommended method, and a higher cost method. And the balance must be looking at what the benefits are, or the cost, and then what the cost would be to have that different level of service. And in terms of what's next for Shelburne's asset management program, we will begin analyzing those level of service options in preparation for next year, focusing on the recommendations that are provided at the end of each section in the asset management plan, and continue to evaluate the program for suitability to make sure the data is being presented in the most effective way and clearly in the asset management plan. And that concludes the presentation. And I will open it to any questions that you may have.
Do we have any questions from council? So it really seems like there's no questions. I do want to comment though on the document, the report. I thought it was extremely thorough, very detailed. The other aspect is really looking at the importance of depreciation and the reserves, and making certain that we're, the investments that we're making, we're putting monies away for future generations to do those replacements. But I really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Carrie?
And I just wanted to add one other thing that has recently happened, and that is that we have hired our operations analyst, and that person will be joining our working group and will greatly assist Chad with helping to set key performance indicators and such for the 2025 update, where we have to identify the levels of service so that we can bring a report to council that is based on more factual information with what does take place in day-to-day operations in both Parks and Recreation and Public Works.
So with that, I'll read out the recommendation, then look for mover and seconder. So it's, be it resolved, the Council of the Town of Shelburne receives staff report FS 2024-05, and further that Council adopts the 2024 asset management plan updated in accordance with Ontario Regulation 588-17. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? That passes. So that takes us to item number 3, which was the addendum to tonight's agenda. And this was a request to serve alcohol at the Shelburne Supreme Slow Pitch Tournament. Councillor Bonato?
They've requested this in the past, and we've usually granted it to them in the past. It is a fundraiser, so I'll move a motion to allow for the serving of alcohol at this slow pitch tournament.
Councillor Wagner?
I'll second that, just because I know Doug personally, and I know that he has security and that, he's very diligent with making sure that garbage is put in the garbage and nobody's rowdy. And so I don't think that this is a major issue. As long as he provides the insurance, we should be okay.
Any other questions? I just will make note, thank you to staff. The actual tournament is being held on July 13th, not the 15th. So it's a slight difference than the actual letter that was attached. And I do have what I think covers Councillor Bernato's request. So we do have a mover and seconder. I'll just read the recommendation, and that is, be it resolved that the request from Shelburne Supreme Slow Pitch to serve alcohol be received, and that council authorizes and grants permission for the serving of alcohol during the tournament being held July 13th. All in favor? That passes. That takes us to item 7, which is councillor motions, notice of motions. Do we have any for tonight? Seeing none, that takes us to section 8, which is communications. Would anybody like to pull out anything specific? Councillor Wagner?
Thanks so much. Just quickly, 2 of them. My only reason to pull out the bylaw enforcement statistics is I just had a quick question maybe for Jennifer. What are false alarms? I wasn't sure what that was when I read over it.
Thank you. Through the Deputy Mayor. So false alarms are notifications that the OPP receive and where an alarm is going off, and they have to attend the property to determine if there's an issue, if it's a false alarm. And so we do have a false alarm bylaw that allows us to, after the 4th occurrence, we charge back to the property owner the cost for that false alarm.
Okay. I was wondering, because I was like, I figured if it was like a false alarm for like the fire department or something like that, and I understood that maybe possibly, but then I was like, I kind of didn't understand where bylaw would come into it, but so that makes sense. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And then my second one is just, I think it was item number 6, which was a note. I'm just trying to find it here on my long list of information. It was a letter from the Honorable Sylvia Jones with regards to the private well testing. And I believe if I'm correct, we had actually sort of written up a resolution with regards to that a little while ago, and saying how we supported the motion to continue with this program. So free testing of wells and whatnot for rural areas. So it looks like she has replied and said that it will remain as such, and that they're not looking at reducing or removing that program. So hopefully it stays that way. I just wanted to sort of bring that up in case anyone was watching and was worried that that program may be removed. Hopefully her words speak true, and it will not be. Thanks.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to pull out? Okay, seeing none, then can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the items listed under communications for information? Moved by Councillor Bernato, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? Okay, that takes us to confirming bylaw. Can I get a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw? Moved by Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Bernato. All in favor? That carries. And then finally, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Come on, Lindsay.
Moved by Councillor Wagner, seconded by Councillor Sample. All in favor? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.